It is time for Pacers Knicks, and finally a Knicks expert is here to help me talk about them and not just be me babbling. Gavin Schall, one of the hosts of Locked On Knicks, and I break it down here. We ask each other questions about the Knicks, the Pacers, the lineups, the key matchups, and of course, series predictions. It's all coming today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, guys, as promised, you might remember him from a year ago. Tony East, somehow we're both here. Nobody expected it. 22 ESPN experts predicted Cavs Celtics. You and I predicted Cavs Celtics, unless you predicted the Knicks, and I didn't know about it. So we were wrong. They were wrong. We're here. I have to begin this by issuing a mea culpa to Pacers fans. You were nice enough to come on my podcast back, I think in February, the last time these teams played. And we were talking about which team the Knicks should want to face in the first round. Actually, no, it might have been more like March. It was a little bit more recent, maybe even early April. Time's not real. And I think I said that I would rather face Detroit or Milwaukee than Indiana. And I just have to tell all Indiana fans that came from a place of ignorance. There wasn't enough respect there. You guys have a fantastic team. So from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. And I'm looking forward to, Tony, a series I think we both think is going to be even better than last year's 7-game slugfest.
Both teams are better, right? And last year's was obviously headlined by some non-basketball things on the Knicks side. Unfortunately, this year, both healthy, both feeling better. Both of these teams, the last time they made the finals, guess who they beat? The team they're currently playing in the conference finals.
Yeah.
Two guys who have this like WWE fake beef thing, even though they're really friends, thing going on that'll be really fun. I can't wait. It's like perfect. For anyone older than like 25, this is like a perfect series.
Yeah, it is incredibly exciting. And I think tactically, again, somehow even more interesting than last year. And I thought last year was pretty fun. But we're going to start off talking about our respective teams. I want to know what exactly clicked for Indiana as they dismantle the Bucks. They dismantle the Cavs. They seem to have some of that same late game magic the Knicks do, where both these teams are putting up comebacks like we've never seen in NBA history and doing it multiple times. When I talked to you in the regular season, you told me that you weren't sure if this year's group had as high of a ceiling because the defense was better, the offense wasn't quite as good, and that maybe translated to more consistency, but maybe not an ability, we both presumed, to go out and dominate a team like Cleveland as they did. Was that series more about what Cleveland didn't do and their injury issues and their lack of shooting? I know Indiana as a team is shooting 40% from three in the playoffs. Is it just hot shooting? Or has a team that since January 1st has been a top 5 team in the NBA played like that and perhaps even better heading into these playoffs?
Yeah, that's it. It says like that. I was not concerned, but I wondered if their offense could get to last year's levels. And guess what? They have the best offensive rating in the playoffs of any team that's still playing. They're back to that, right? And so forget what I said in whatever time we said that. Yeah. Like they're just scoring so well. And like the signs that this was possible were very obvious, right? They had a top 5 effective field goal percentage this season, despite having like a miserable first 25 games. They generate and make good shots. They have shot makers on the team from like any level of the floor. It's just at times this season, even when they were playing their best, like winning all these clutch games late in the season, it was like, hey, should you really be going to crunch time against the Brooklyn Nets twice in a week? Like, but it was still there that they could score. And so when they like really dial into an opponent and they can figure out how these coverages evolve throughout a series and they can problem solve, they're just so hard to guard for a 7-game series. Even when they lose, Joe Mazzulla's like, yeah, that was the hardest team we played this year. It's like, this is what they can do in this setting. And here they are again, like you said, top 4 or 5 record since January 1st, and they just ran through a 64-win team because they can score so easily that they set the pace in the terms of engagement on defense, and their defense is better than last year, so that helps too. And all of a sudden, it's like, oh, this team is like really good, really good.
I think that problem solving, maybe we'll talk about it a little bit more. Second segment, I know we'll touch on a third segment. That is my biggest concern for the Knicks in this series, a team that looked incredibly locked in Game 6 against the Celtics and for quarters and halves against the Celtics. And outside of that has been pretty miserable just in terms of like nailing their own defensive scheme. And I think that could just kill them against the Pacers. But for now, I want to know a little bit about Tyrese Haliburton. Obviously, he comes into this series in a very different place than he did last year, where like that injury was still potentially bothering him. He had a very weird second half of the season, 2023, 2024. Somewhat weird start to this year where our guy Matt George was posting revenge graphics and talking about how much better De'Aaron Fox is than him. And lo and behold, Haliburton figures it out second half of the year, seems to be fully healthy, seems, as far as I can tell, to be playing the best basketball of his life, maybe the most underappreciated superstar in the league, and not someone I expect to come out and put out like a 6-point stinker like he did early in that series a year ago. What is new with Tyrese Haliburton this year, especially relative to that series last season?
Yeah, he now has as many conference finals since 2024 as the Kings franchise, so I don't think those graphics will last much longer. Yeah, really good player. You know, the thing, like last year, he dealt with all the things that you talked about with the injuries and stuff. But what he actually dealt with as he ascended to All NBA status from back end All Star was teams started to change their defenses to guard him and make it hard for him to do the things he's good at. Around Christmas time, it was here's all these blitzes and traps, and then it evolved when they changed their starting five to this and that, and the pick and roll coverage just changed. So you'd have like pockets of the season in 2023-24 where he wasn't quite as good. And then he'd figure out what that looked like and he'd be better coming out on the other side. And so last year, game one against the Bucks, not very awesome. Game one against the Knicks, not awesome. And it's like this huge story about, it's the wrong word to use, but people say be aggressive. Like it's not about aggressive for him. It's about his reads of a defense and getting into the paint. Regardless of my own opinions on that, he worked through a coverage or worked through, okay, here's what this team is doing. Here's how I do what I do best to beat it, right? That was like the evolution of his game. And so now this year, he started the season dealing with these injuries and wasn't playing very well, and it was a huge story. But once he got healthy, now he's seen all this, right? Mm-hmm. He's seen every coverage. His team is exactly the same as last year. So they collectively have seen how he responds to those coverages and gets them open. And so it's not as easy for him to be slowed down, one, and it's not as challenging for him to start a series and go, okay, what are they doing? What do I have to do to beat this? Like he's more ready right away to me. And so it wasn't like an amazing start to the Bucks series. It was way better than last year. And the Cavs series, he was, 20 something in the game one that year. Like he has figured out basically everything that's been thrown at him. Now, OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges collectively on the same team are like huge and a new thing, but he's played against the Knicks 3 times, right? I'll be curious what the Knicks try to do, because the Cavs did not trap him until the fourth quarter of the final game of the series, right? They weren't that unique in their coverages. Some teams try switching defenses against the Pacers. Some teams think that offensive rebounding is the best way to stop the Pacers, which is something I'm like, oh, okay, the Knicks are pretty good at that. But regardless, he's just even though he started the season so bad that his season ends up being air quotes worse, he is better. And like his feel and reads are better in a way that makes it harder to stop him or stop the Pacers when he's on the floor. And he's not going to, it might just happen because he misses shots or something, but I would be stunned if there's one of those 6.5 shot stinkers to start the series.
All right, let's flip to the other Pacers starting guard. Knicks fans obviously remember Andrew Nembhard, iconic shot in game 3. And I watched that series and I was like, damn, that guy just played the series of his life against the Knicks.
No, he did not.
On top of the injuries, it cost the Knicks their season. And then, Tony, I watch him against the Boston Celtics. I watch him in this year's playoffs, and I'm like, no, this guy is just, again, apologies, Pacers fans, for not knowing this earlier, but he's just really good. Exceptional basketball player. Like, the term playoff riser at time gets overused. Like, it feels legitimately applicable to him. And it is the rarest thing in the sport. It is the most impressive thing in the sport, especially from a role player. And he has that in him. What continues to click for Andrew Nembhard in the playoffs?
Man, if we knew, we would tell you, because everybody would do what he does, right? Like he just, every time he's asked about it, he's like, yeah, the ball goes in and I shoot it and I make it. And I play that. Like he just, something about this. He's played in big games his whole life, right? He was on a really good high school team, and Gonzaga made the finals, and the Pacers are good. Like he's just a really good player who's like used to the stage and will bark at anybody, even though he's kind of quiet. Like he's just a really good player. And yet I kind of still feel like the Knicks are his personal bugaboo. Like he was so good on Dame. Mitchell struggled, air quotes, with him. Like it was the hardest matchup Mitchell had that series. Brunson last year was still the only guy that's like, yeah, Nembhard can't, like nothing. He's doing nothing to him. Jalen Brunson shooting like he's not there. So Nembhard's really good. You have to put a good defender on him. You can't just ignore Andrew Nembhard or he will kill you. He can make threes. He can get to the basket. But I think his defense in this series is where I'm fascinated. Can he get through that kind of like last hurdle of guy that he couldn't stop last year to the point they were like, nope, we're putting Aaron Nesmith on Brunson instead. Nembhard's been awesome in the playoffs this year. I think he would like to defend a little better this time around, but that is certainly he's awesome, and that is something I'll be watching in this series.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see who on the other end of the floor, who Jalen Brunson is guarding between those two. I think that could be.
I would assume Aaron Nesmith, but Aaron Nesmith is also better than last year. So
yeah, and it's someone who can definitely shoot over Jalen Brunson all day. All right, last individual guy I wanted to touch on. Bennedict Mathurin did not play in last year's series. If I'm remembering correctly, don't believe it did. Did have a 38-point game, which I wiped from my mind, Tony, in the second game of the year where these two teams played all the way back on November 10th. 38-8 in that one. Pacers won by 11. What has he brought as sort of a new element athletically in this series beyond just absolutely torturing a certain calf throughout that series?
Yeah, oh man. I mean, that's what he's like, ready for the playoffs mentally and all that kind of stuff, right? You see that with his mentality, but like his never-ending struggle is like his fit with the Pacers versus what he's really good at. In that next game, he scored 38 points. The stuff he's amazing at was just like every play. They're like, give me the ball. I don't care who's guarding me. I'm going to go to the basket and draw a foul. I'm going to make it three. I'm going to do whatever. That's the best game of his career, one of the best games of his career. But he's always played well against the Knicks. I think he'll be decent in this series. What he's done in the playoffs very well is he's started to blend what is required of him and what the Pacers need him to do. His first game ever in the playoffs against the Bucks, his cutting was awesome. He's getting his threes up quick without like stopping and looking at the defense and reading what's going on. Right. All of that has been really big in his sort of growth in the fit part of the game. But then he had like a huge half against the Cavs that won them game 2, helped them win game 2. He was really good in game 3 of that series, even though they lost. Like he's finally figuring out where he can be him still. And I wonder if this series will be the time where I still think it's coming. There's going to be one Ben Mathurin game in the playoffs where they win or have a chance to win because he was so awesome. Maybe that already happened, but where he could get close to the high 20s or 30s in points. And so his playoff game, this is his first playoffs where he's figuring out what it's all about and how he needs to be him, has been really interesting because he can do what he did against the Knicks, but they haven't really needed him to yet. I'll be curious in this series specifically where it's two teams that were just on complete opposite ends of the pace spectrum. If there's a game played at the Knicks pace, they need Ben Mathurin to be that guy, not the fit-in guy at times. So he's an interesting kind of X factor to me in the series. Siakam, similarly, if the game slows down, I can turn around and shoot over anybody stuff is going to be really important.
All right, last one. This is a question that probably requires a segment or an episode. I'm going to ask you to do it in like a minute. What's so improved about the Pacers defense this time around?
Yeah, like it's weird. And last year you talk about this team and like I could watch them and say, oh, Andrew Nembhard defends well and Aaron Nesmith defends well and Myles Turner's a good defender. And Siakam has size to be a good defender. TJ McConnell's a pest. Isaiah Jackson, who they don't have this year, but still, he's a good defensive player. It's like they have good defensive players, but they suck. Like, why? This doesn't make sense. And this year, they're just better, right? They haven't like dramatically changed their scheme. They aren't. Last year, it was so much like run teams off the line, give up stuff at the rim, hell or high water. They've kind of gotten away from how dramatic they were in that. I think that's been helpful. But, the way they've talked about it, it's just like kind of individual chemistry, if that makes sense. Like Andrew Nembhard and Myles Turner defending a pick and roll together. They've gotten better in those sort of settings. Aaron Nesmith, same thing. He's cut his fouls down. Like that kind of synergy is what's made them better. They're way more connected. Like you can just kind of see it in a way that stats don't really tell it. Like there's not just like a layup line for these teams all the time. There's not a million open threes for some role player all the time. And, you can find a million stats to back that up if you want, but they're just better, right? They're just more disciplined. They're just more connected. They've played together for a year. Haliburton's still not a good defender. He'll tell you that, but it's not like embarrassing anymore. Like all their bench guys have a certain purpose or role they can play on that end, maybe besides Obi Toppin, although he's still tall and athletic. So they're just better, right? And last year, they've said before that the playoffs last year was some of the best defense this group has played together, and now they're better. And it's helped them against two decent offensive teams. They need it to be good again, or the Knicks will be scoring a lot. They can score a lot pretty quick, Gavin, as we saw against the Celtics in many a second half.
Yeah, sometimes, except for when the starters are in. We're going to talk about that in just a sec here on Locked On Knicks and Locked On Pacers.
Everybody, ever check your bank account, wonder where'd all my money go? Monarch Money is here to help you with that. Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. And Monarch Money, your personal CFO, will give you full visibility and control over your finances. It's not just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and start building wealth. when I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now you can budget smarter and save more by seeing all sorts of surprising insights. They have great all-in-one convenience, so you don't have to juggle multiple apps. You could just use Monarch for all these features that they have, and it's easy to collaborate with your partner and have multiple accounts in there so you can stay on track, on the same page, and set goals together. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONNBA for half off of your first year. Back crossing it over on Locked On Knicks and Locked On Pacers. Make your second listen today. Locked On Thunder or Locked On Nuggets, pending who won Game 7. Gavin, I don't know yet because we're recording before the game actually starts. Gavin, let's talk about the Knicks. I made my own theories for this on my Sunday show. The Knicks have a great starting five in that they have 5 very good players who start. However, that lineup itself is not really playing that well together. What is up with that?
So it basically everything changed when teams started when the Fire Nation attacked. No, when teams started putting their wings on Karl Anthony Towns. That was pretty much the changing point. Fred Katz of The Athletic had a great stat. I had been referencing since the All-Star break that group had been a net rating negative. It turns out since Christmas they've been a net rating negative. And the number all year we were saying is like most minutes of any 5-man group in the league by far. And they were like whatever, +5, +4 for most of the year. Since Christmas, they have been a negative over a ridiculous sample size. If you wanted to be a glass half full person, you would say, well, it seems like they started to find something against the Boston Celtics, right? Second half of Game 4 was easily the best that lineup has ever looked, where they overcame an 11-point lead, where Jason Tatum, before he got hurt, was continuing to rain fire on them, and it just didn't matter because everything was working. They were firing on all cylinders. It was perfect. Game 5, sort of the opposite, even when Josh Hart was making threes. Like, it was just too hard to score because Boston was playing 2 bigs and just parking Al Horford and Luke Cornett around the rim. And that's great, Josh. Shoot your threes. We're going to block every single thing you do inside. OG Anunoby's going to shoot 1 for 12. Like, you're just not going to get anything easy. And teams have suffocated the Knicks doing this. And Tom Thibodeau, and I've ripped him a lot this year. He's made a lot of brilliant adjustments on the defensive end in these playoffs that have got the Knicks through these first 2 rounds. Offensively, he has refused to lean into what I would consider 2 pretty obvious options, which would either be starting Deuce McBride for Josh Hart. They finally got a couple minutes with that group in Game 6, and it looked just fantastic. Or go double big with Mitchell Robinson, and what you were alluding to, just try to bully Indiana, try to bully Boston on the glass. They were terrible when Mitchell Robinson was off the floor against the Celtics. They were great when he was on the floor against the Celtics. All this is added up to, like, I have the numbers in front of me. For the full playoffs, the starting 5 has a -5 net rating, a 107.5 offensive rating. That would be one of the worst in the NBA. I think pretty much the worst of any playoff team so far this year. Against the Celtics, that was all even worse. They were -9.5 against the Celtics with the starting 5 on the floor. 102.5 offensive rating, which is obviously like abysmal, something out of like the 90s when these teams last met in the conference finals, and a 112 defensive
Where's
rating.
Roy Hibbert?
Where is verticality, baby? A 112 defensive rating. So that group has just not been good. And we know the Indiana Pacers starting 5, I looked today on Cleaning the Glass, +21 in these playoffs. If Tom Thibodeau refuses to adjust, Indiana could very well win this series purely off of that.
Yeah, I am very curious how that will go. And I talked about that a little bit too. Like, feels like every time I watch the Knicks, Deuce McBride makes 2 contested tough threes. Like, that dude's just a great shot maker. Like, they find him after every rebound and get him the ball. And so when it's him and Brunson together, they have, I mean, you know this better than me, but like, they have 2 guys who can handle and score. And when it's the 2 bigs, they can bludgeon. And Mitchell Robinson's defense is like, wait, this is amazing. Like, he's moving so well on the perimeter. What's going on?
And so you just can't put a wing on Cat, right? With Deuce out there.
Right.
Totally untenable and unlocks him. But yeah, sorry.
So it has worked really well. And so that's what I'll be curious is how much because it's not only that they have a negative net rating, they lead the playoffs in minutes, right? So they're playing a lot together too. Like, you're just kind of hurting yourself by doing that. Yeah. So I'll be curious how that kind of takes hold, because the other factor of this is the Pacers, they just did this to the Cavs. They have this like wear down effect element to them because of their pace, but the Knicks are obviously very well conditioned. They play these guys 40 minutes a night. You know, how much can those Pacers bench units versus mixed Knicks groups actually take hold? I know Josh Hart's part of the answer, but like, how much do the Knicks love to crash versus just have good rebounders? Because I think that's going to be a story of this series. The Pacers offense sometimes struggles against teams that are really good at offensive rebounding because of the way they like to get out in the open floor.
So we saw early in the series last year, the Knicks really hurt Indiana doing that. And that series and the Sixers series and the playoffs before, like, I felt like the Knicks doubled and tripled down on that identity. The premise when you went and got Karl-Anthony Towns was not so much like we don't need to do that gritty stuff anymore, but it wasn't quite the same like when you went from Cat, who is a good offensive rebounder and has been quite good at times in these playoffs, but like Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson, that was the best offensive rebounding center duo in like recent NBA history, to the best of my knowledge. Maybe apologies to Alperen Şengün and Steven Adams on that front. But I think when Mitchell Robinson is in, like he's going to be crashing constantly. And he's likely going to have a very high success rate doing that. So it's hard to burn the Knicks because he is just getting so many of those offensive rebounds. Josh Hart has been dealing with a knee injury. Basically, it's been said since the All-Star break. It feels like from an explosion standpoint, he hasn't been quite the same guy since the first 40 games of the year, where I would have argued he had like a very fringe All-Star case. Maybe some of that is the matchup. Some of that is the center being on him. He did look more like himself against Boston in terms of like taking a rebound, going coast to coast, crashing and getting offensive rebound. So I would expect that to tilt up a little bit. OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges have both been better rebounders. Mikal Bridges significantly so than in the regular season. That was one of the keys to Game 6, that those two were flying around. Mikal in particular, getting offensive rebounds, getting putbacks. I don't think it's part of the Knicks' identity quite to the same extent that it was last year, with the exception that in the Mitchell Robinson minutes, they're going to be counting on him to do a ton of that because it's what keeps their offense afloat when he's on the floor.
Rebounding. I've cited it many times. The team that won the rebounding battle won every game in this series last year, Gavin. It's going to be quite important. And hey, Karl Towns, their new addition. He's pretty good at that. Who's guarding Tyrese Haliburton?
Who's guarding Tyrese Haliburton? That's a good question. I think it'll start off Mikal Bridges. If
that is my assumption as well.
Yeah, I did not go back and watch last year, but it was similar. Obviously, not quite the same dynamic because they're very different players, but somewhat similar to Tyrese Maxey, where like Haliburton just with like his weird, like off kilter, off pace game, how quickly he's getting off the ball. It doesn't feel like you're fully leveraging OG Anunoby having him in that matchup. And you also just sort of need OG to guard Pascal Siakam, right? Because
that's what I think is going to happen also, yes.
We saw the Knicks try Josh Hart after OG got hurt. And Josh Hart, like valiant effort. Like I thought all things considered, did a great job. You at a couple minutes here and there when OG's out, sure. You don't want to be reliant on that because Pascal, to your point, when things slow down late in games, he's just going to be able to shoot over Josh Hart every single time. OG about as well equipped as anyone in the league to at least give Pascal some trouble. I've seen people speculate at the idea. I know I'm getting away from your question and into our next segment, maybe that like Pat could get some time on Siakam, and that's interesting.
Do not recommend.
Yeah, I think
not recommend.
He get into a lot of foul trouble very quickly. So because of all that, I think it'll be Mikal Bridges and Tyrese Haliburton, which is really, really interesting because the Knicks had, I think, a significant reason why the Knicks defense has been dramatically better in the postseason relative to competition than in the regular season is because they've gotten Mikal Bridges off the ball and OG Anunoby on the ball. In the regular season, the reason the Knicks nominally traded for Mikal Bridges was because he was considered, especially in his time in Phoenix, an elite screen navigator. And that was going to cover up Karl-Anthony Towns and his weaknesses in drop defense. B-Ball Index had Mikal Bridges, I believe, and in terms of like large sample size guys, as the worst screen navigator in all of basketball. And he has clearly ramped up the intensity. He's playing harder possession to possession. He's playing with more focus possession to possession. That is still a very wide gap to overcome and not something he's been asked to do as the Knicks have leaned into OG on the ball and more switching. So I wonder if they stick with that. That opens up its own can of worms. But despite all those caveats, I would be surprised if they start with OG and Haliburton. I think that's more of a pivot if Mikal doesn't work out.
That is pretty much exactly how I feel like it should go. This is going to be an interest. Like no one's going to be guarding their position in this series. Maybe I don't know who Haliburton.
Brunson on Nembhard. Possibly.
That's true. It's going to be a lot of cross matching, and that makes transition very important. Last question for me. This was more so the case in the Pistons series, but kind of was in the Celtics series. Why does it feel like there's like a lot of Knicks games where one half of the game, Cat is really involved, and the other half of the game he has like 3 shot attempts, 10 touches? Where's Karl Towns? Why does that happen?
Yeah, so I think the wing on him, center on Josh Hart thing rears its ugly head again there. Like it is just it is difficult when you have a wing that's mobile enough, right, to stop those like stampede drives that I think defined his early season, and especially for the Celtics, right? Because Drew Holiday could pick his pocket, Jason Tatum could pick his pocket, even though Cat has a relatively good handle for a big. Obviously, I think that limited him. When he got to the paint, there was always the center waiting because they just acted as if Josh Hart didn't exist. That limited him. Tom Thibodeau did not call a lot of plays for Karl-Anthony Towns, and that continues to mystify Knicks fans. Even as the organized offense rate went up for the Knicks at times in this playoffs, they called more for McHale. They called a little bit more for OG. That did not really come for Cat until Game 6, where the Knicks really made an emphasis to get him the basketball. And even though the Celtics were still playing that same defense, because the Knicks emphasized getting him the ball, because Cat was more decisive and more aggressive than we've seen from him, essentially all playoffs, you got basically, they didn't need a full game. They needed 2.5 quarters to go up by 40 on the Boston Celtics. And a lot of that was because Cat was extremely aggressive. He said, I don't care that there are two guys there, right? I'm going at them. I'm going to draw a foul. I'm going to finish. If I miss, I'm going to put it back. I'm firing a three with guys in my face. And if the Knicks get that version of Karl-Anthony Towns, I think they have a chance to have a very successful series offensively. But it is kind of on him to just say, like, screw it. Like, even though the environment is very imperfect, like, I'm still going to be an all-NBA player. Because if he doesn't, like, the Knicks don't seem very proactive in getting involved, to the point that Josh Hart basically called out the coaching staff after Game 5 for not doing that. So that is certainly one of the most interesting elements of this series to me. I
love Josh Hart media availabilities because he's like, here's what I'm thinking. I'm going to say it. There's no...
and I'm going to eat 1,000 Mike and Ike's while I do it. So.
I love player candy, man. Jeremy Lamb was a big Starburst guy. You just, when it happens, you know it happens. Let's talk some X factors, some keys to the matchups, and of course, Gavin, what everybody wants to know. Who's going to win the series? Back here, Locked On Pacers, Locked On Knicks, crossing it over. Locked On Wolves for the only team we know now is in the Western Conference Finals for sure. I'm sure Ben Beacon and someone will be doing a crossover just like this for the West very soon. Gavin, your non-star X factor for the New York Knicks in the series. I have my prediction for who you'll say, but I'm curious who you are going to say.
Yeah, if you don't want to consider him a star, I'm going to say OG Anunoby. He was so good against Indiana through 2 games last year when he hurt his hamstring, was in the middle of the game of his life. I'm hoping that doesn't come up again. He was holding his hamstring, I think, in Game 4, and he ended up coming back in and being fine. Looked not quite himself defensively, at least in Game 5. Looked a little better in Game 6, was committing a lot of fouls. Wasn't sliding his feet the way he normally does. Shot pretty terribly in Game 6. Like, the Knicks would have likely been up by 30 early. This sounds weird. First world problems, right? Up by 30 earlier against the Boston Celtics in Game 6. Even a depleted Boston Celtics.
6 minutes in, 4 minutes in.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. But he missed about 3 corner threes where he had like 5 seconds to load them up. Like, it is clear that, like, he is just so up and down in terms of whether his shot is there on a specific night. And we see, like, when he knows the ball is going to be in his hands, when he's time to get a rhythm. He had this 9-game stretch when Brunson was out where he put up like 28, 6 and 6 on like 54, 47, 90 splits. Like, he looked like not an all-star. He looked like an all-NBA player with what he was doing on both ends of the floor. Defensively, his ability to create havoc, to get the Knicks out in transition is just unmeasured. And he's turned it up at times in this playoffs to just an insane degree. His ability to guard Pascal Siakam one-on-one, we talked about, but like absolutely essential to turning off the water on Indiana in half-court situations, and just his confidence. And I think the Knicks, like, willingness to get him involved in the action. Mikal Bridges would be my very quick second answer there, because I have a feeling he's going to be Tyrese Haliburton's matchup to start this series. And if they do, I'm curious if Tom Thibodeau is willing to run Bridges Hart pick and rolls and attack Myles Turner, presumably playing some drop defense. We saw again when Brunson was out, Bridges had a whole lot of success. Like, I think about the Portland game the Knicks played, just going at Donovan Clingan, attacking drop bigs, getting into a rhythm. His ability to just hit mid-range shots in the fourth quarter against the Boston Celtics won the Knicks that series. His activity level won the Knicks that series. So it is hard for me to separate those two wings. So I'm gonna cheat a little.
Yeah, I was curious which wing you'd pick, and then I thought, well, if he goes for the deep cut, I hope he says Mitchell Robinson. I think Mitchell Robinson could be he's very important in this.
He was arguably their best player against the Celtics, so fair answer too.
Like, people laughed at this because of the free throw part of it, but Joe Mazzulla was like, yeah, we wanted him out of the game. Mitchell Robinson, like, they were like desperate to get him off the floor.
Yeah,
in a series against a 60-win championship team, like, that says everything. He was
the Knicks were something like minus 40 for the series when he was out. Like, they could not play the Boston Celtics when he was on the bench.
My Pacers answer is Aaron Nesmith. As Knicks fans know well from Game 7 last year, he gets going. He's pretty good. And he is a much better finisher this year. Like, he continues to grow with the, don't run me off the line. Like, I will score. I will make a mid-range shot. I will score at the basket kind of guy. He just happens to be a really good shooter too. So you have to decide how you're going to defend him. And teams always pick him as the weak link because he's the worst, just handle the ball, run a pick and roll, drive to the basket guy on the team, besides Turner, obviously, but he's a center. So he always gets the Dame's on him. Brunson maybe in this series is on him. Darius Garland or Mitchell's on him. And he's like, okay, I'm just going to score 17 points or grab 13 rebounds or do all this stuff in this game instead. Like, he can do that way more consistently now. And he did not have a great shooting playoffs last year until that Game 7 in the Garden, where it was like, oh, this is just the best player. So I think if he has a more consistent series, he's a good defensive player. He might get the Brunson assignment. He certainly will when Nembhard's off the floor. Although they might just minutes match those guys. Nembhard and Donovan Mitchell were locked in their minutes in the last round. He's going to be super important to me. If Nesmith has a rough scoring series, it's going to be a long series for the Pacers. If his defense isn't there, if he gets in foul trouble, please, basketball gods, no ref storylines. Please. It's every series now. It drives me crazy. I think Nesmith is really important. And Mathurin could be as well, just because the pace element of this is going to be so fascinating to me. Like, the first two teams the Pacers played aren't as fast as them, but they at least are comfortable playing moderately quick in the Cavs and Bucks. Not that the Knicks aren't comfortable playing at faster speeds, but they are by far the slowest paced team that they've played. Yeah. And if the game gets grinded to that, the Mathurin, Siakam, get bucket stuff will be important, even though the Pacers are absolutely not their best when they play that way. They'll need those kind of plays to go their way to win those kind of games.
I am incredibly curious about how the Knicks transition defense looks for a coach as detailed oriented as Tom Thibodeau. It has been a blight on this team all season long, where they don't get matched up. And the worst thing is, it is not that somehow there are two guys on one person. It's that the one person the two guys are on is usually the wrong person, right? It's Malik Beasley wide open. It's Peyton Pritchard. It's Derek White wide open. And similar in the half court, where guys who have played together for forever, like the Villanova guys, like Brunson and Hart, are botching switches, and McHale and Hart are botching switches, and Cat and OG don't know who's going with who off the ball, and someone gets a wide open three. And I think as much as I expected Boston to just torture the Knicks with that, the Knicks were able to shortchange that by switching everything. I don't know if that works as well against Indiana, because I think Indiana will be a little bit more patient than Boston about hunting out the right matchups, about getting an advantage, not to shoot, but to make the next pass, then make the next pass, and then get an open three, which while I think the Knicks were able to catch Jason Tatum saying, oh, great, I'm going to shoot over Jalen Brunson. Oh, great, I'm going to take Karl Anthony Towns off the dribble. I don't think the Pacers take that bait. Are the Knicks assignment sound enough to keep up with everything Indiana's going to throw at them? And of course there will be times where the Knicks just break, but can they win enough of those battles? In Game 6 against the Celtics, they were incredibly assignment sound, incredibly disciplined. There was a fervor that we have not seen from this team all season long. Everyone knows the Mitchell Robinson play, right? Where he guards five guys on one possession, ends with him closing out to Jaylen Brown on the corner and forcing a steal. One of the best defensive possessions I've ever seen. That kind of epitomizes it. And I'm curious if the Knicks bring that, or do the Knicks only bring that when their backs are against the wall?
This will be a challenging transition defense series for both teams, just because, like I said, no one's guarding your guy. So when you're getting back, the guy who just guarded you is not who you are on. Yeah. So you have to decide, do I just stick on this guy, or do I go find my guy? And if 1 out of 5 guys picks differently than the other 4, someone's open, right?
Screwed. And all right. Yeah. And for the Knicks, I got to say, just be mismatched for the possession. If there's anything we've learned in these playoffs,
it's easy to say that, but if you're the one guy who's back, you're great, I can go get my guy, but you can't, right?
But it doesn't work, and it's such a great point.
I think seconds to decide.
It's been the issue all year, doing the quote unquote smart thing versus, even if it's the dumb thing, we're all going to commit to the dumb thing. Right. Because if one person does the smart thing and 4 people do the dumb thing, everyone's dumb, right? And it doesn't work. So.
I like that way of putting it. Yeah, the rebound. The last thing I touch on before we do predictions is just the rebounding is a big thing against the Knicks. Mitch is a great rebounder. Cat's a good rebounder. The big men are good. The Pacers just played Mobley now. They just played 2 bigs who are good at rebounding. They survived okay against the Cavs. The difference is Josh Hart is on the Knicks and OG Anunoby is on the Knicks. The perimeter rebounders on New York are tilting in terms of impact on the glass in a way that no one on the Cavs is, right? And so I'll be very curious how the Pacers decide to handle that. I mean, the answer is you box out and you get the rebound, right? If you don't get the rebound, it doesn't matter. But that does limit what their pace can be going up the floor the other way and all that kind of stuff. Hart's going to be a huge player in the series in that way. So I'll be curious who's on him and how locked in they are in the glass, because a bad rebounding game from that player could like literally tilt a game or two in the series. And, bigs are, everybody understands the tall guys grab the rebounds, right? But like it's the Knicks having a 6'4" guy who can do it that changes a lot. What is Josh Hart? Is he 6'5", 6'3"? I don't know.
6'4", 6'5". I don't
made
know,
this up a couple days in a row. I'm going to get it wrong. Knicks fans can comment and make fun of me. I haven't looked it up. They're saying it 3 days in a row.
I will say, I think Game 6 was easily the Knicks' best rebounding game of the year. So they're coming in confident on that front. This has been a team that has been unable to handle success at times.
Well.
See if that keeps up. I guess to that point, if I remember correctly, we both picked the Knicks last year. Who do you think wins the series?
I did pick the Knicks in 7 last year, so I only got Game 7 wrong. Yes, if I could see that the Pacers would have shot 76% for a half of a basketball game, I might have felt a little better about them winning that Game 7. Yeah, the Pacers are better than last year. The Knicks are better than last year, but I think the Pacers are 50 games of a huge sample of them being better than the Knicks, right? Since January 1st. And if they had like grinded out a 7-gamer against the Cavs, I would have thought really hard about this. Pacers are playing awesome. I think I truly think they're better. I know Knicks fans will not agree with me. I bet you pick the Knicks right now. I think the Pacers are just the better team right now. They'll have to win a road game in this series. They've already won several of them in this postseason. I'm taking the Pacers to win the series in 7 or 6 games. I'll pick 7 for the fun.
Sure. I am very tempted to go contrarian and pick the Pacers as well. Because it is almost as simple as like the starting lineup. The lineups that are going to be on the minutes, If
Tibbs waits too long, I think that you're going to be right about that. Yeah.
Anyways, if I remember how to speak English here, if the lineups that are going to be on the court for the most minutes, the Knicks one is just not very good, and the Pacers one is elite, fantastic. Like it feels hard to predict the Knicks, and I don't see Tibbs pivoting, right? Like even maybe if Indiana was up 3-0, he would change the starting lineup. Like, like we've just had such a large sample size of this being a thing and Tibbs not pivoting. I'm going to pick the Knicks in 7 because I think that the ceiling that they showed in Game 6 against Boston in the second half of Game 4 is just alluring. Like it is the first time all year we saw all these guys play their best at the same time. And I think like player for player, this is an element because we would need like an hour preview to get into it. Like the Pacers depth versus the Knicks lack of depth is interesting. How much that matters in the playoffs? Does it not matter when you get to the conference finals and everyone's playing 40 minutes anyways? Like I just think the Knicks best players are a little bit better than the Pacers best players. That doesn't mean the Knicks are going to win because the Pacers best lineups are better than the Knicks best lineups. But I think Tibbs leans enough into Mitch on the floor, enough into Deuce on the floor that the Knicks are able to overcome the lineups that are on the floor the most, that battle tilting Indiana's way. So I'm predicting Knicks in 7. Might be a little homery. Like I'm not certain about it. I do think Indiana, like they had some basketball nirvana moments of their own against the Cavs. 80-39 at halftime of Game 5 of that series. Like it's just ridiculous. Like the Pacers are incredible. No one should be shocked if they win this series. No one should be shocked if they win the title. I'm picking the Knicks because I think they can be special at their best.
A very fun series. 2 franchises who probably think this is their best chance to make the finals in like 25 to 30 years. Yeah. And as I texted you, it's the plot armor series. 2 teams that have overcome their regular season failures, cannot lose a clutch game ever. And here they are, knocking on the doorstep of a series they think they can win. Neither of these teams has won a conference finals game in a while. They'll hope that they can do it this year. Gavin, this was a wonderful. Where can Locked On Pacers listeners find you?
Everywhere you can find Locked On Pacers, you can find Locked On Knicks. Same is true both ways. Oh, we say it every time we do one of these crossovers, but leave some comments on Locked On Pacers, Knicks fans, Pacers fans. Come on over.
They are already all over it, let me tell you.
Oh, really? Okay, fantastic. They can be mean. They can be friendly. We don't really care as long as you listen, as long as you leave them. But until next time, he's Tony East on Locked On Pacers and Gavin Schall on Locked On Knicks. We'll be back very, very soon on our respective feeds with much more on this series.